Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for a presentation and discussion on the SH45 Small Area Plan. My name is Erin Sellers. I'm an innovation strategist for the City of Pflugerville and working on this project. We also have Lionheart here tonight, our consultant on the project that will provide the presentation. The SH45 Small Area Plan is anticipated to be developed as a collaborative effort between the City of Pflugerville, residents, area property owners, as well as the Pflugerville Community Development Corporation. Visioning and public engagement are important elements in the planning process, and we very much appreciate your attendance tonight and eagerness to help us craft this plan. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand this off to Abby Gilfillan with Lionheart, and she'll be walking you through this project tonight.
Thanks, Erin. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Abby Gilfillan. I'm with Lionheart Places. We're an urban design, landscape architecture, and planning firm in the Austin area, and we're really excited to be working with the City of Pflugerville on this plan. I will give you, tonight, the agenda is just give you a brief overview of the plan. What are the goals? What are some of the desired outcomes? What's the process? And where are those touch points for involvement? It's great to see this turnout, and we really hope that you stick with us all the way through until we get to the end, and I'll let you know when those opportunities are and to do that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the site itself, where it is, some of the existing conditions, some of the things that we've observed as we're starting to prepare some of these alternatives. I'm going to walk you through some of these alternatives at a high level, and then talk a little bit about next steps, how to stay involved. But really the bulk of the time tonight is where we would like to have some individual conversations with you around the room. We want to get some real specific feedback, if possible, on some of these alternatives, because this is really the very first initial draft. There's a lot of different alternatives. I'll talk a little bit about those, but we want to get a lot of feedback. So we have a lot of different opportunities to get feedbacks, lots of formats, and so we, again, appreciate your time. I'll jump right in. We started this in April. And we really talked about some of the vision and goals. This project is following up right on the city's adoption of the Aspire Pflugerville 2040 Comprehensive Plan. And this was one of the recommendations out of this plan. And so this area is in the plan. It's referred to as the Uptown District. And it's one of the spaces where the city recognized that there needed to be some additional planning done. So we started off with vision and goals. We have some drafts of those vision and goals around the room, and we want to get your feedback. We want to understand what are the most important things out of those, what are your priorities when you look at these goals, and then did we miss anything? So that's what we're asking when you look around the room. The next thing, and this is where we are now, is really sort of reviewing some of these alternatives. So what we've done is we've crafted 3 different alternatives, and they are not, we're not really asking which one do you want, but we're asking which parts out of each one of these do you want? Because the goal is to create a preferred plan out of this feedback that we receive, and that preferred plan is going to look different than all 3 of these plans, but it's going to have the elements of each one of these that people said that they like the most. So for example, we have 3 different land use plans, and you may like the land use plan out of scenario A. We have 3 parks plans. You might like the parks out of C, and you might like the transportation out of B. And those are the things that we want to understand. We'd like to know why. And so we appreciate you being here in person because it helps to have those conversations to really understand why. And those things all help us to get to this preferred plan, which is the next step. And we hope to be thinking about this preferred plan as well as some of the recommendations on how this gets implemented in the future. And that will be happening in an August timeframe. So you'll get another notice of an opportunity to come out and give us some comments on this preferred plan once we get there in August. And then the next step, we're hoping to get to a point after we get feedback on that preferred plan to wrap that up into a final document that goes for review and approval. And this will be approved by Planning Commission and the City Council. And that would be in September to October timeframe. So that's the process overall. As I talked about, the plan really falls right on the heels of the adoption of the Aspire Pflugerville Comprehensive Plan. A comprehensive plan builds a framework for a whole lot of systems at a really high level throughout the city, and it also identifies places where there needs to be a more specific and detailed level of planning done. And this was one of those areas that was identified, this SH45 small area plan area. This is one of the pages directly out of the comprehensive plan that talks about this uptown district. As you'll see, the boundaries in the comprehensive plan are a little bit larger than the boundaries that we're talking about. We've narrowed into a smaller area, but still encompasses a lot of this space. Some of the actions, which you'll also see on that first board, so if you want to look at them more closely, are to work with TxDOT to establish the continuation of Row Lane. So that's one of the big pieces of this area is this concept of Row Lane, and this is in the city's thoroughfare plan as well, is this concept of Row Lane connecting across SH130 over to Heather Wild. And so this is the part of this process is looking at some of the alignments for that, what does it look like, and how does it function through that space. So we're looking for some feedback on that. One thing you'll see when you get to the transportation board is that we've got 3 different sort of general alignments for that. And so we'd like to get some feedback on your thoughts about that. I talked about Row Lane, really the comprehensive plan talks about designing that not just as a thoroughfare for cars, but how do you make it a little more mixed with, bicycle and pedestrian paths and trees, things like that to make it a nice space. There is a plan that was adopted called the Corridor Plan along SH45 and SH130, and taking a look at that plan now, especially with Aspire Pflugerville 2040 being adopted and looking at any kind of updates, that's one of the actions. It's recognized that this area is a little bit cut off because of SH45 and SH130, and it's cut off from the park system as well. So really trying to bring some regional park system as well as a local park system to this area of town, because this is one of the areas of town that is not as well served as others for parks. Investing in infrastructure, as well as strategic deployment of incentives to support some intense development along SH45 as this key innovation center. So this area is identified as an innovation center in the Aspire 2040. But it is those same roads, SH45 and SH130, that create this barrier from the park system, also create a challenging barrier to getting infrastructure, water, wastewater, and streets into this area. So that's one of the goals of this plan. Developing public improvement design guidance for streets and public spaces, working with some of the large property owners towards some shovel-ready land to support economic development, and working with TxDOT, working with Travis County, and collaborating with PCDC. So, looking at those visions and all of that work that was done as part of the Aspire 2040 plan, this is a draft vision for this project, this little smaller scale and level of planning, which is to proactively build a framework for the high quality development of the site that's flexible enough to respond to changing markets while ensuring creation of an innovative employment and vibrant wellness-focused mixed-use destination that fully realizes the potential of this prominent location in the region and provides for a coordinated approach to public infrastructure improvements. So that's the vision that has come together, that's in a draft, and we would like any feedback on that. These are the 4 goals. You'll see these around the room in terms of their colors. One is partnership, recognizing that this tract of land, development of it, really does require partnership, and that's partnership with the landowners, partnership with community, partnership with the city, in order to see the development of this space. The next one is place. So serving the local and regional community with an innovative and mixed-use place centered on health and wellness. So the idea that through this plan, you can start to see the vision through Aspire 2040 of this place as this real mixed-use destination. It's a place for people, and try to see something different than what's maybe more business as usual or that's been going on in the corridor. And through these partnerships and through these efforts to try to get to something that is a little bit different for Pflugerville than some of the past along the SH45 and 130 corridor. Connections, so improving accessibility and walkability to and within the site. One of the things that we noticed, first off, and in talking with some of the stakeholders, is that the site really is very disconnected, even from a street level. So you've got pretty much Heather Wild, you've got SH45 and SH130, but there's very few off-ramps to actually enter the site from. So it's pretty disconnected, and so connections are really important. And then parks, which I've already talked about. It's also pretty disconnected from the parks system. And so there's some opportunities for regional parks. This area is in terms of the region, is in a really prominent location. It's located between Austin, Round Rock, Hutto. It sits at the intersection of these two major regional transportation corridors, north and east of the Austin area. Many large employers are coming to this area, Tesla, Samsung, Apple, Dell, IBM. This site sits right there with regional access to all of those along those corridors. And so it really becomes an opportunity and a prominent site. I talked a little bit about, so that's at this regional scale, but at this neighborhood scale, there are some challenges. And I've talked already about it, but the barriers that are presented, while they present tons of opportunities from this regional perspective, they do present some barriers to the site from a local perspective. These roads of SH45 and 130. And that's in utility infrastructure, local street connections, pedestrian bicycle connections, and the Parks and Open Space Network. So that's one of the things that, one of the challenges that this plan is trying to solve for. This is the site, narrowed down now at a site level. And the plan, the area is, there are some, it's a large majority of it is vacant. There are some edges, I would say, along the SH45 and SH130, and there's some lower density residential to the north, which there needs to be some buffering from. And there's these high capacity corridors to the south and east, and then there's Heather Wild Boulevard. One of the things that we notice about the site is that there's a lot of topography, especially close to the intersection there of SH45 and 130, and you really can't see into the site except when you're up on the flyways. And then once you're up on the flyways, you can't get into the site from up there because you just go right by it. So those are just some of the observations from our existing conditions. Partnerships is one of our first goals. There are 5 major property owners within this area. And then there's the Panther Drive ETJ area, which is another interest. And so we've got these ownership interests, and then we've also got local and regional entities as partners. City of Pflugerville, Pflugerville CDC, Travis County. Part of this property is outside the city limits in Travis County. And then also TxDOT needs to be a big partner as well. All right, so getting into the alternatives, and I'll just reiterate again that these alternatives, we're not looking for this one's the one, this is the best. We're looking for what is best out of each, or what is not working out of each. So starting off with scenario A, this one is sort of, it's a less mixed, and so it's a little bit more if there was a maybe lower level of partnership and each landowner of the major landowners was sort of doing its own thing, this might be a little bit more of the scenario that would happen. It's a little similar to what you've seen in some other places along the SH45 and 130 corridors, where you've got some office warehouse, some multifamily, some medical offices, and some parks and open space, but they're a little bit fragmented. Some office, but a smaller amount, and some retail. The next scenario in terms of land use, you'll notice first off that this is a much bigger mix. There's a whole lot more types of land use in here. So if you just look at the pie chart from one to the other, you'll notice that there's just a lot more going on. And so this is a much more mixed neighborhood. It really focuses on corporate campus. So this is if you were really able to get in there and look at some larger office and corporate campus type development. So that's what the large pink area there is, office. It's got some residential to the north to buffer from the adjacent single family there, and I'll talk a little bit about the park system. But this one is really designed around these three different sort of activity centers where there's a lot of activity going on, and the road network creates that triangle there within the site. One of the other things I'll mention about this one here is that it's a little denser. And so you've got a smaller road network, you've got more connections, you have potentially some parking garages that go along with this one so that you can see sort of a higher density and more activity going on. The park system is more like 3 different plazas that are more urban in nature. You do have some regional detention space as well, but this one's a much more sort of dense and compact type of arrangement. This one is a little bit of a larger format, so you can see the roads are a little bit further apart and separated. You've got a similar mix of uses, but they're a little bit more mixed throughout and a little bit more equally dispersed between the different types of uses. And this one has one sort of that dark green spot there. It's a little bit hard to see on here, but this dark green spot here is it's like a destination space, more like a plaza type park. So that's one. You might have retail along the ground floor and some residences above overlooking a plaza type of a space. But then it has a lot of, there is some low spot and natural drainage within the site. And so this one really uses that natural drainage network to create a more natural park system, as opposed to in the last one you saw those 3 different sort of more urban plazas. So those are the land use. You can see all 3 of them here compared to each other. The thing to really pull out and notice again is just that you have a much higher degree of mix in B and C than you'd see in A. And then B really focuses on that corporate campus, and in C you have a lot more residential, both of the single family residential buffering up towards the back. That's a single family mixed residential, and then the multifamily. In terms of the transportation network, this really looks at the 3 different alignments of row lane. So one row lane sort of stays very similar to what's in the current city's thoroughfare plan. The second one there, B, the row lane, you really build more of a 3-part system to the network within there. So it's a little bit more creates more opportunities to get around. It's a little bit more compact. And then in the third one, row lane really juts down to the south and then comes straight over to Heather Wild. And in doing that, it tries to avoid that sort of natural drainage way as much as possible. So those are the 3 different alignments. One thing you'll see is that it really starts and stops in the same place in terms of where it hits SH130 and where it hits Heather Wild, because SH130, it's the continuation of row lane that's coming from the east. And so that could be an overpass. So it's got to start there. And then on Heather Wild, it has to end. There's a median break there on Heather Wild, anticipating this road coming in. So those are the two spots it starts and stops, and so we've really got some different alignments other than that. The other things you'll notice, like some things that really pop out is that number of intersections. So again, with a sort of larger format where you don't have that partnership as much, you have landowners sort of operating more on their own. You have less roads connecting across, whereas in B and C there's a higher level of partnership, and so you've got more connections there, more roads that are connecting. And then this is the park system, and I talked a little bit about that. One thing to point out is that any development that comes along will always build parks that goes along with that to support the residential that they build as part of the parkland development that's required. But these parks that we're identifying are over and above that. The dark parks, those dark green parks, are those destination parks. And so those would be over and above that sort of standard commitment for parkland. And that's my presentation. Go over just next steps one more time. So again, this is where we are. We're right at the beginning of this process where we've got these three alternatives. We're wanting to collect as much feedback at this point as possible, because the next step is to get to take all of that feedback and take these three plans and try to combine them into one preferred plan. Then you'll get another shot and another opportunity to look at that preferred plan and provide us more feedback on that one. And then it moves forward to the policymakers, Planning Commission, and City Council. And we are hoping to finish the process up in September and October timeframe. And that's all I have. So really, as I said, it's a lot of information. So we wanted to have a lot of time for you all to review that information. Some of the ways to provide feedback are on these boards. We have some activities that very much match what's in the survey questions, where we're asking you to prioritize goals, prioritize objectives, and let us know which of the three scenarios you like best for place, for parks, and for transportation, and let us know why. And that's a really important piece, and that's why it's great to be in person again, and it's great to be able to have conversations. So it's an opportunity to have conversations with your neighbors and staff, and we are here as well. So really appreciate your being here.